In the early 1980s, television was hijacked by a new breed of commercials, provocative, relentless, and sometimes reckless, as brands raced to shock America on airwaves suddenly stripped of old rules. That's how 1980s commercials that stirred up trouble was born. With Calvin Klein doubling sales by airing Brooke Shields' infamous line, "Nothing comes between me and my Calvins," even as two major networks refused to play it. Outrage exploded, but the campaigns just grew bolder, turning late-night TV into a battleground for controversy and cash. But what pushed advertisers to risk everything? And what lines did they cross that we're still arguing about today? The answer begins with a single decision at the heart of network power. The early 1980s didn't just set the stage for wild commercials. They tore up the rulebook entirely. At the center of it all was FCC Chairman Mark Fowler, a man who saw television not as a public trust, but as just another appliance. Under Fowler's watch, the FCC dropped decades-old restrictions, turning broadcasters loose to chase ratings and ad dollars with almost no oversight. In 1984, the commission eliminated limits on the length and type of commercials during children's programming, a move that sent shockwaves through both the industry and concerned parents. Trade magazines buzzed with warnings about an oncoming flood of toy and cereal ads, while advocacy groups worried about the disappearance of educational content. Editorials in Broadcasting and Advertising Age called this a radical shift, moving TV from a community service to a pure business. Fowler's own words captured the moment. He wanted less government interference and more competition, believing the marketplace would sort things out. By the end of his tenure in 1987, TV airwaves had become a playground for marketers, with broadcasters free to pack Saturday mornings with whatever sold best. Critics in Congress and the press sounded alarms, but the genie was out of the bottle. The result? A new climate where advertisers could push boundaries, test taboos, and gamble on controversy, sometimes with explosive results. The first shot in this new era came from a designer jeans company willing to risk everything on a single, unforgettable line. Calvin Klein didn't just want to sell jeans, they wanted to sell a sensation. In 1980, the company rolled out a campaign starring Brooke Shields, who was just 15. The tagline was simple, but loaded. "You want to know what comes between me and my Calvins? Nothing." That line didn't just stop traffic, it nearly stopped the networks. ABC and CBS refused to air the ads, calling them too suggestive for prime time, especially with a teenage model at the center. But controversy only made the campaign hotter. Print versions plastered Times Square, and syndicated TV picked up the slack, running the spot for millions to see. The backlash hit hard and fast. Parent groups and the National Organization for Women called for boycotts, slamming the ad for sexualizing a minor. Local affiliates pulled the commercial. Editorials piled on, with one viewer calling the jeans "painted on." Shields herself later said she didn't even realize what the fuss was about at the time, but the outrage didn't slow sales. It doubled them. Calvin Klein's jeans became the must-have item of the year, and the brand locked in a reputation for pushing every boundary in the book. Photographer Richard Avedon, known for high fashion and edge, shot the campaign. Behind the scenes, Shields' mother negotiated every detail, trusting Avedon's vision, but not quite expecting the firestorm that followed. The ad never crossed the line into anything explicit, but it didn't have to. The suggestion was enough to make headlines, spark protests, and launch a new era of controversy as marketing. For Calvin Klein, the risk paid off, at least at the cash register. Joe Camel had a grin you couldn't miss, and that was the whole point. In 1988, R.J. Reynolds gave their cigarette mascot a makeover. Out went the old Camel. In came a cartoon slick enough for a Saturday morning. He wore sunglasses, played pool, and popped up everywhere from billboards to birthday party swag. But the real jaw-dropper came in 1991 when researchers found that 6-year-olds could recognize Joe Camel just as easily as Mickey Mouse. That wasn't a coincidence. Internal memos, pried loose by lawsuits like Mangini versus RJR, revealed a paper trail of youth marketing. Code words for starters, sponsorships at carnivals, even activity booklets meant for kids. Camel's share among teen smokers shot up, from just over 2% in 1979 to more than 13% by 1993. Public health groups sounded the alarm, and soon the Federal Trade Commission was digging through stacks of confidential documents. By 1997, the evidence was impossible to ignore. The FTC filed a complaint accusing R.J. Reynolds of illegally targeting minors. The company pulled the plug on Joe Camel that same year, but the damage was done. A cartoon camel had lured a generation, and for the first time, the government forced Big Tobacco to admit it. Joe Camel became a cautionary tale, and cartoon mascots for cigarettes were banned for good. The message was clear: some lines can't be crossed, even in the wild world of advertising. Tom Kalinske had a simple plan: make Sega louder, bolder, and impossible to ignore. In 1990, Sega of America unleashed the Sega Scream, a campaign that didn't just advertise games, it shouted them from rooftops. Every spot ended with a wild-eyed fan bellowing "Sega," so loud it rattled living rooms. The message was clear. Nintendo was for your little brother, Sega was for you, the kid who wanted attitude, speed, and a little bit of trouble. The ads poked fun at Nintendo's safe, family-friendly image. One commercial showed a buttoned-up dad recoiling as the Sega Scream blasted through the TV. Kalinske and his team wanted every parent to hear it and every teenager to want it. The results came fast. By early 1992, Sega controlled 65% of the 16-bit console market in the US. Genesis outsold Super Nintendo nearly 2-1 that holiday season. But not everyone was cheering. PTA groups fired off complaint letters about the volume, the snark, and the way Sega seemed to celebrate rebellion. Some networks even asked for the Scream to be toned down, worried about scaring younger viewers or annoying parents during family shows. The controversy just added fuel. Kids imitated the Scream at school. Sega's brand became shorthand for cool, risky, and a little bit rude, exactly what Kalinske wanted. For Sega, the Scream wasn't just a sound, it was a battle cry, and it worked. The console wars were on, and every kid knew which side brought the noise. On January 27, 1984, the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles was packed for a Pepsi commercial shoot. Michael Jackson stood center stage, ready for the sixth take. Pyrotechnics were set to erupt behind him, closer and hotter than usual, all for that perfect, dramatic shot. The cue hit, sparks flew, and suddenly, his hair caught fire. Jackson kept dancing for a few seconds before stumbling as the flames spread. Crew members rushed in, smothering the fire with their jackets. He was rushed to the hospital with second- and third-degree burns on his scalp. News of the accident made headlines worldwide. Pepsi's safety team faced tough questions about why warnings had been ignored. The images of Jackson's injury became as famous as the commercial itself, a reminder that chasing spectacle can sometimes go too far. Catchy jingles weren't just background noise, they stuck like glue. In the early 1990s, Diet Pepsi landed a monster hit with Ray Charles belting out, "You got the right one, baby, uh-huh." The phrase came out of a late-night writing session with Arthur Baker and Cliff Freeman chasing something anyone could sing. The result was so infectious it ran for years, but some critics in the black press called out the campaign for leaning too hard on old stereotypes. Ray Charles shrugged off the debate, but the conversation kept bubbling. Meanwhile, Wendy's had its own earworm. In 1984, Clara Peller asked, "Where's the beef?" And the world answered. The catchphrase was everywhere, until Peller's contract fight with Wendy's went public and the brand cut her loose. Even with the drama, both slogans outlived the scandals, proving a good jingle can survive almost anything. In 1980, sales of Calvin Klein jeans doubled, even as major networks like ABC and CBS refused to air Brooke Shields' controversial ad. Throughout the decade, deregulation under FCC Chairman Mark Fowler set the stage for increasingly bold and sometimes reckless marketing. The Joe Camel campaign, launched in 1988, was later found to be recognized by over 90% of children in one study, fueling lawsuits and a 1997 federal ban. Not every answer is clear. Internal decisions behind some campaigns remain sealed, and the long-term psychological effects of these ads are still debated. Yet the legacy is plain. Many tactics, from youth targeting to shock value, shaped the rules we know today. The boundaries pushed in the 1980s forced new debates, leading to tighter oversight and changing what's allowed on air. As the documents and footage show, the era didn't just sell products, it changed advertising itself.